Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, a really big question. One that's kind of lingered for centuries, I think.
Mm.
And it's this. Is there really this deep, unavoidable conflict between science and spirituality? It often feels that way, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, you get to
Well,
choose one side or the other.
exactly. Science explaining things, making the world seem, I don't know, less mysterious, while spirituality seeks meaning, connection. Things science maybe doesn't measure.
Right?
You might have felt this tension yourself. Does science push the divine away, or could it maybe bring it closer in some unexpected way?
And that's precisely what we're diving into today. That common idea, that perception of them as
Mm.
just fundamentally opposing forces. Science, all measurable, verifiable,
Right, the hard fact.
and spirituality, often seen as, well, faith, the unprovable.
Yeah.
But we're going to explore how something like quantum field theory, QFT, let's call it, is almost accidentally, it seems, reopening a dialogue. A really profound one, actually.
Moving beyond those old arguments.
Hopefully, it's offering a way to maybe reframe the whole conversation.
It's fascinating, but okay, let's be super clear right at the start. We're not saying QFT proves God exists or validates any specific religion.
Absolutely not. That's a really important distinction. It's easy to fall into that trap, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
What QFT does offer, though, is potentially just as powerful. It gives us a new language, a new set of metaphors and concepts.
A framework.
Exactly. A framework to maybe understand some very old spiritual ideas in a fresh way, ideas about divinity being within things immanent, and about creation being a process, not just a one-off event.
So our mission today, let's unpack maybe 3 key ideas from QFT. See how they kind of echo some ancient wisdom. See if it gives us a new perspective on what divine could even mean in this quantum universe we live in.
Sounds like a plan. It's a journey into how we understand reality itself, really.
Okay, let's unpack this fascinating intersection. Where do we start?
Well, I think to really grasp how radical this QFT view is, we kind of need to look back first. Understand the old picture, the scientific view that dominated for so long.
You mean the Newtonian world, the clockwork universe.
Precisely that. It's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah, you can almost see it, this giant, perfect machine. Like a cosmic clock, every gear meshing perfectly, everything predictable.
Right. If you just knew where everything started, you could predict exactly where it would end up. Total cause and effect. Orderly. Elegant, even.
And it worked. I mean, it explained so much about the world, planets, falling apples. It made the universe feel understandable, tamed almost.
It was a huge leap forward, no doubt. But within that mechanical view, the idea of God often shifted, didn't it?
Yeah, it became the first mover, the divine watchmaker.
Exactly. The one who designed this incredible machine, wound it up, set the laws in motion, and then what?
Stepped back, maybe. Let the
Yeah.
machine run itself.
That was often the implication. The laws were fixed, the machine was running, no need for constant tinkering. But that view, it inadvertently created a kind of distance.
How so?
Well, divinity started to feel external, like an architect who finished the building and left. Not really involved in the day-to-day running of the place.
Right. Not an intimate presence, but a distant creator.
Yes. And this led directly to that idea of the God of the gaps, didn't it?
Ah, yeah. Explain that.
Well, as science explained more and more, lightning disease, the stars, the gaps in our knowledge where people might have previously said God did that, those gaps started shrinking.
So if science could explain it, you didn't need God for that particular phenomenon anymore.
That was the thinking within that framework.
Yeah.
Every scientific discovery seemed to push the divine further into the margins, less relevant to how the world actually works.
Which you can see how that would really deepen the feeling of conflict between science and faith. Like one was winning, the other losing ground.
It definitely fostered that sense. It created this feeling of disconnect for a lot of people. How do you square a personal, maybe imminent spiritual feeling with a universe that seems purely mechanical and impersonal?
If God is just the retired watchmaker.
Then where's the room for ongoing presence? For a living, dynamic connection that many spiritual paths talk about, it made divinity feel separate from the cosmos, not woven into it.
But then things started to change. Dramatically.
Yeah.
In the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics, and then QFT, just completely overturned that clockwork picture. It wasn't just a small adjustment. It was a revolution in understanding reality.
Pulled the rug out, really.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And here's the twist.
Hmm.
This new physics, developed for purely scientific reasons, started to resonate in surprising ways with some very old spiritual ideas.
Which is kind of the core of what we're exploring today, this unexpected
It's
resonance.
a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah?
QFT is hardcore science, math, experiments, predictions about particles and forces.
Right. Not philosophy or theology.
Not at all. Yeah. But almost as a side effect, the concepts. It uncovered concepts of the nature of reality, matter, even empty space. They just happen to echo ideas you find in mystical traditions, often completely unintentionally on the part of the physicists.
So again, not proof, but a different language, new tools.
Exactly. Science, just by trying to understand the universe at its deepest level, stumbled onto perspectives that give us new conceptual tools, new ways to think about ancient questions. What is existence? What is creation? How is everything connected? Science didn't mean to, but it opened up new avenues for these old inquiries.
It shifts the whole conversation. Okay, so let's dive into the first big QFT concept, the one that really challenges our basic assumptions about what stuff is.
Right. Let's talk about the fundamental nature of reality itself. We need to contrast the old view with the new QFT view.
Okay, the old view. What did we think stuff was made of?
Fundamentally, tiny, solid things. Particles.
Like little billiard balls, atoms as these hard, separate spheres bouncing around. That's the image, right?
That's the intuitive picture, yeah. The universe is a big container filled with these tiny, distinct individual building blocks. They interact, sure, but they are fundamentally separate things.
A cosmic game of pool. Makes sense on our scale.
It does. But here's where QFT just flips the script completely. It says the most fundamental thing isn't the particle, it's the field.
The field. Okay, hang on. Not tiny balls, but
Go it.
something spread out, like jam on toast, but everywhere. Help me visualize this.
It is hard to visualize because it's so different from our everyday experience. Think of it like this. QFT says there isn't like a tiny electron ball sitting somewhere. Instead, there's an electron field.
A field.
Yes, an electron field that exists everywhere throughout all of space and time. And it's the same for everything else, fundamental. There's a quark field, a photon field for light, the Higgs field.
Whoa. So space isn't just empty stage waiting for actors.
No, the fields are the stage and the actors, in a way. These fields are the fundamental reality. They permeate everything. Think of space itself having these inherent energetic properties everywhere.
Okay. If the fields are everywhere, then what are the particles? The electrons and quarks we detect? The things that make up chairs and stars and us?
Ah, see, what we call a particle, what we detect as an electron, say, is actually just a localized excitation of its field.
An excitation.
Yeah, like a vibration or a ripple in that underlying field. Here's the analogy people often use. Think of an ocean.
Okay.
The ocean, the water itself, is the fundamental thing. It's everywhere, right?
Right.
Now, you see waves on the ocean. They rise up, travel, maybe crash, disappear. They're patterns, disturbances on the surface.
Okay, I see the waves. They're temporary.
Exactly. The wave isn't the fundamental thing the ocean is. The wave is just a temporary excitation of the water. In QFT, the fields are the ocean. They're the fundamental reality.
And particles.
Particles are the waves.
Yeah.
They're localized ripples, vibrations, excitations in those fields. So the universe isn't an empty box filled with separate things. It's more like a dynamic, interwoven tapestry of these fields. And everything we see are just temporary patterns, ripples, within this cosmic fabric of fields. Our solidity, our seeming separateness. It's an emergent property of these interacting fields.
That changes everything. We're not just in the universe, we're literally made of its fundamental stuff. Like waves are made of water.
Precisely. We are expressions of these underlying fields.
Okay, my mind is officially stretching. And this is where the connection to spiritual ideas comes in, right? Because that sounds familiar somehow.
It really does resonate, doesn't it? This scientific picture offers a surprisingly modern way to look at ideas from many ancient mystical or non-dual traditions.
Non-dual meaning, not separate.
Meaning reality is ultimately one, indivisible whole, that the separation we perceive between things, even between ourselves and the world, is, at a deeper level, maybe an illusion. QFT provides a kind of conceptual scaffolding for that idea.
Can you give examples? Which traditions are we talking about?
Well, think about Hinduism, for instance.
Yeah.
The concept of Brahman. Brahman isn't typically seen as a person like God up there. It's described more as the ultimate, unchanging, impersonal reality, the very substance and creative principle of everything.
Ground of being.
Exactly. And all individual forms, like individual souls or Atman, are seen as ultimately just manifestations of that single Brahman. Like all the different waves are still just water.
So the field is like Brahman and the particles are like Atman, metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, yes. It provides a new way to perhaps grasp that concept. Or think about Taoism and the Tao.
The way?
Right. The Tao is described as this formless, indescribable, underlying principle. Everything arises from it, returns to it. It's the natural flow, the essence. Not a being, but the source itself.
The unmanifest potential.
Yes. And QFT, describing reality as fields from which particles emerge.
Well, it gives us a new scientific vocabulary, doesn't it?
Right.
It makes these profound, sometimes abstract, spiritual ideas maybe a bit more relatable if you think in scientific terms.
It bridges a gap, maybe.
Yeah.
Provides shared language. It could. It offers a tangible, though still abstract, framework.
So, pulling this together, how does this QFT view of fields change the whole idea of God, moving away from that distant watchmaker?
Well, if you take this framework seriously, God isn't some external entity manipulating things from outside. That image just doesn't fit anymore.
Right.
Instead, you could conceptualize the divine as perhaps the sum total of these fundamental fields, the underlying immanent reality itself.
Immanent meaning, present within everything.
Exactly. Divinity isn't separate from the universe. It is the universe at its most fundamental level. The vibrant, energetic medium, the stuff of existence.
Wow. So what does that mean for us? For people, if God isn't out there but is the fabric?
It means we aren't separate from it. We're not just creations in it. We are expressions of it.
Like the waves are expressions of the ocean.
Exactly. We are part of that universal ocean of being. It fundamentally shifts our perspective from being separate objects acted upon by an external force to being integral parts of the divine unfolding itself.
A profound sense of belonging, almost.
It could certainly foster that, yes. A sense that the separation we feel is more about our perception than ultimate reality.
Okay, as if that wasn't enough to chew on, QFT also has some pretty wild things to say about nothing, about empty space. The vacuum.
Yes, the quantum vacuum. Classically, you think of a vacuum and it's just emptiness.
A total void, nothing there. Take all the air out of a box, seal it perfectly. Empty, simplest thing imaginable.
That's the classical picture, but QFT comes along and says, hold on, it's not empty at all.
Not empty, what's in it?
It's described as a seething cauldron of potentiality, a plenum void. Even in what looks like empty space, there's this baseline energy.
Plenum void, full and empty. That sounds like a contradiction.
It does, but it stems from one of the cornerstones of quantum mechanics, the uncertainty principle.
Okay.
It means that even in empty space, there's always this fluctuating zero-point energy. And this energy is constantly, spontaneously giving rise to pairs of virtual particles.
Virtual particles, like almost real.
They pop into existence, say, an electron and its antimatter counterpart, a positron, literally out of the vacuum's energy. They exist for an incredibly tiny fraction of a second.
And then
Then they annihilate each other and disappear back into the vacuum. It's happening everywhere, all the time. A constant fizzing, bubbling creation and annihilation.
So nothing is actually incredibly busy.
Unbelievably busy. And these virtual particles aren't just theoretical quirks. They have real, measurable effects on real particles. They even affect the expansion of the universe through what we call dark energy. So the vacuum isn't static background. It's the fertile ground from which reality itself is constantly emerging.
That is completely different from the old idea of creation. Like creatio ex nihilo, creation from absolute nothing, as a one-time event in the past.
Exactly. This QFT picture suggests creation from an active, dynamic nothingness, an ongoing process happening right now, everywhere.
Wow, that sounds much more like some mystical ideas, doesn't it? The fertile void, the divine womb.
It resonates much more closely with those kinds of concepts, yes. It's less like a single act of making something from absolute non-existence and more like a continuous wellspring.
Not a blank slate, but a pregnant emptiness, full of potential.
That's a great way to put it. Constantly giving birth to reality. Think of, say, the Kabbalistic idea of Ein Sof.
Which is?
It represents the boundless, infinite divine essence before it manifests, pure potentiality before any form, the nothing that contains everything.
Okay.
Or consider the Buddhist concept of sunyata, often translated as emptiness.
But it doesn't mean just nothingness.
No, not in a nihilistic way. It's more like a dynamic state of pure potentiality where things arise interdependently, lacking any fixed, separate self, empty of inherent existence, but full of potential for connection and rising.
So the quantum vacuum, it's like a scientific echo of these ancient ideas, a source that's both nothing and everything, constantly creating.
You could see it that way. It acts like the creative engine of the cosmos. A modern way to maybe visualize that divine abyss from which everything is continuously bubbling forth, not just once, but always.
Which again shifts the idea of God. Not someone who did create, but the process of creation itself.
Exactly. God, not as a noun, a finished thing, but as an active creative verb, the ongoing becoming of the universe.
Creation not as a past event, but as a continuous unfolding
Yeah.
right now.
Yes. And if we're part of that unfolding, part of that creative process, well, that raises some profound thoughts about our own role, doesn't it? Our own potential.
Okay. Fields is the fundamental reality, the vacuum as a non-empty source of creation. What's next on the mind-bending QFT tour?
Now we get to perhaps the most famous and arguably the weirdest concept, quantum entanglement.
The spooky action at a distance? Einstein's phrase?
That's the one. He found it deeply unsettling, even though it's now been confirmed experimentally over and over again. It's real.
So what is entanglement, simply put?
It's where two or more particles become linked. Their fates become intertwined in a very specific way, no matter how far apart they get.
How far? Like, across the room, across the galaxy?
Does matter. Theoretically across the universe.
Yeah.
If you measure a property of one entangled particle, say, its spin.
Like whether it's spinning up or down.
Sort of, yeah. If you measure it on one particle, you instantly know the corresponding property of the other particle. Instantly.
Yeah, instantly. Faster than light. How does the information get there?
That's the spooky part. It doesn't get there. There's no signal traveling between them. The connection is immediate, non-local. It's as if they aren't truly separate entities, even when miles or light years apart.
That just breaks my brain's cause and effect rules. Things are supposed to influence each other locally, right? By bumping into each other or sending a signal?
Our classical intuition says yes, that's locality. Entanglement seems to defy that. It suggests the universe isn't just a collection of separate things acting locally. It's somehow deeply, holistically interconnected.
Like invisible threads connecting everything.
It's a powerful implication. It demonstrates a fundamental non-separability in nature. The idea of completely isolated objects might just be our macroscopic illusion. Reality is more unified than it looks.
And the scientific fact.
Hmm.
How does this resonate with spiritual thought, especially our feeling of being separate individuals?
Well, it offers a kind of startling validation for a core teaching found in so many mystical traditions. The idea that our sense of being an isolated, separate self is ultimately an illusion.
The illusion of separation.
Exactly. Many traditions teach that this feeling of being cut off is created by our minds, our egos, but it's not the fundamental truth. Entanglement provides a scientific concept that points in a similar direction, suggesting that at the deepest level, separation isn't the full story.
Like in Buddhism, you mention anatta, no self.
Right. Which doesn't mean you vanish into nothing. It means there's no fixed, independent, unchanging you inside, separate from the flow of existence. You're a process, interconnected.
Or Christian mystics talking about union with God.
Yes, like Meister Eckhart talking about the soul merging with the divine, losing that sense of separation. The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. That kind of radical non-duality.
And entanglement, while not explaining consciousness directly, gives a powerful metaphor for that underlying unity.
It really does. It shows that the universe's basic constituents can be linked in this profound, non-local way. So if the building blocks aren't truly separate, maybe the larger structures built from them, including us, aren't ultimately separate either.
Maybe the separation we experience is just a feature of our scale, our classical worldview.
That's a way to think about it. Our everyday experience might be masking a deeper, entangled reality. It certainly challenges our ingrained sense of individuality.
And the implications go beyond just how we see reality, right? It touches on consciousness, ethics.
Absolutely. If everything is fundamentally interconnected, it lends itself to ideas of a collective or universal consciousness, individual minds, as perhaps nodes in a larger network.
Which sounds very spiritual.
It does. And it gives ethics a different dimension, too. If we are all fundamentally connected, part of one system,
Then harming someone else is, in a weird way, harming yourself. Or harming the whole system.
in a very real sense, potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's not just a nice sentiment. It starts to sound like a description of reality, compassion, empathy. They become less like moral choices and more like recognitions of how things actually are.
Like the golden rule isn't just a good idea, but reflects the unified nature of being.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Altruism as a reflection of fundamental reality, not just an optional extra. Our actions resonate through this interconnected web.
Okay, this has been, wow, a really deep dive connecting physics and these profound spiritual echoes. But we need to touch on something important before we finish. A word of caution.
Yes, definitely. It's crucial. While these parallels are fascinating, inspiring even, we have to be really careful to avoid what's sometimes called quantum mysticism.
Quantum mysticism with that.
It's basically misusing or oversimplifying these complex scientific ideas like entanglement or the quantum vacuum to try and prove specific spiritual beliefs or make wild, unsubstantiated claims.
Taking things out of context, stretching the metaphors too far.
Exactly. Saying things like quantum physics proves telepathy or entanglement means we can manifest anything instantly. Science doesn't support those leaps. Remember, we've been talking about metaphorical connections, conceptual frameworks, new ways to think about things.
But not scientific proof of spirituality.
Absolutely not. QFT provides a new language, a new lens. It doesn't provide direct evidence for God or souls or afterlife in a scientific sense. The goal isn't to bend science to fit our beliefs.
But to see how science, in its own rigorous way, has arrived at a picture of reality that happens to resonate with some very old human insights about unity, creation, and the nature of being.
Beautifully put. It prompts deeper questions, it enriches the dialogue, but we must respect the boundaries of what science actually says.
Got it. So let's try and wrap our heads around this journey. We went from that old clockwork universe, with its often distant God,
Right, the divine watchmaker.
for something incredibly different, more integrated, dynamic, connected. QFT hasn't proven God, but it's radically changed the language we can use.
It really has. It's given us a new vocabulary grounded in our best understanding of fundamental reality.
So instead of separate particles, we have underlying fields.
Recasting divinity, perhaps, as the immanent fabric of reality itself, the ground of being.
Instead of an empty void, we have the quantum vacuum, teeming with potential.
Reframing divinity, maybe, as the continuous creative process of the cosmos. God as a verb, not just a noun. The ongoing becoming.
And instead of separate objects, we have entanglements, spooky action.
Providing that powerful scientific echo of oneness, of interconnectedness, challenging our illusion of separation.
It feels like the overall shift is from a distant monarch ruling a machine
To the vibrating, interconnected, ever-emerging heart of a living quantum cosmos. It's a universe that feels much more alive, much more unified.
and maybe, just maybe, more sacred in a way that science itself is revealing.
It certainly opens up that possibility for contemplation.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has sparked some aha moments for you listening about reality, maybe about your own place in it all. It's definitely given me a lot to chew on.
Me too. It's amazing how physics, just by looking deeper, can circle back to touch these ancient human questions.
It shows how different ways of knowing, scientific, spiritual, philosophical, can sometimes, surprisingly, converge.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. If the universe really is this dynamic tapestry of interconnected fields, constantly emerging from a fertile quantum void, what might that mean for you? Does that shift how you think about your own creative potential or your connection to the people, the planet, everything around you? Does it change your sense of responsibility or possibility?
That's definitely something to ponder. As always, there's so much more to explore. We really encourage you to keep digging into these ideas from different angles.
Absolutely. Keep asking questions.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.